I am delighted to welcome my guest today, Stephen Washington. Stephen is a speaker, an author, a recovery advocate, and so much more. As always, his full bio will be in the show notes. Welcome to the Element Q podcast. I'm your host, TJ Woodward, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for this empowering journey. Each week, we shine a light on the authors, thought leaders, therapists, coaches, and healers of all types who are making a difference in the LGBTQ plus community. Together, we honor those who came before us, the courageous and resilient trailblazers who stood for our rights and recognition. Their strength laid the foundation we stand on today. Here, we celebrate their legacy by diving into the stories, insights, and tools that inspire gentleness, healing, and transformation. So get ready to be uplifted and empowered. This is the Element Q podcast. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, TJ. It's lovely to be here with you too.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So looking forward to this conversation. When you and I were talking before the show, you mentioned that when you think about healing and the LGBTQ community, the first thing that came up for you is self-care. So I'm curious to get our conversation started. What does self-care mean to you? We hear a lot about it, but what is it actually, and how do we practice it more often?
I think self-care is anything that we do that tends to our body, our mind, and our spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's as varied as there are different people in the world. Like what self-care means to me today might be different from what it means to you today as well. Like today, self-care was me getting out of my apartment where I live and I work and get out into the sunshine. Get out into the sunshine and be amongst people. Have a cup of coffee. Walking, getting some exercise. Taking some deep breaths. That's self-care for me today. And then also this conversation, making sure that I connect with community is also a part of my self-care, because none of us live in a vacuum, in a bubble. People need people. And it's an important part of our overall well-being.
I love it. And, I recently did a show with my friend Beck G, and he was talking about self-care and community care. So I love that you're bringing that piece into it, because I do think a lot of times when we think about self-care, we think that it's only ourselves that we can care for, or only ourselves that can actually provide that care. And ultimately that might be true. And yet, community is so important, connecting with others. I love the way you walked us through what self-care looked like for you in a very practical way. The other thing I love that you shared is the idea about body, mind, and spirit. And I talk about it through the lens of the four rooms: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. How do we care for all four of those? And that to me is really a deeper level of self-care.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because body, mind, spirit are all connected. Mm-hmm. From a Chinese medicine standpoint, I'm a Qigong teacher, so I geek out on Chinese medicine and theory. Everything is energy. Physical energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy, mental energy. It's all the same energy, just different manifestations of it. Mm-hmm. We impact one, we also impact the others. So it's important that we just tend to all aspects of ourselves: body, mind, and spirit. Oftentimes, I think in Western culture, we separate them as if they're so distinct and separate, but they're interchangeable, they're interconnected. So it's important to address that.
Well, and I love the way you just phrased it. You said it's all the same energy with a different manifestation, right? Or a different area that it shows up. And I think that's a fundamentally different way of approaching it than I have these different parts of myself, right? I remember at one point in therapy, I remember thinking, I'm not actually a box with four sides. And we keep talking about these different parts like they're separate. And they, quite frankly, they did feel separate from me. And I think it was because I had abandoned parts of myself, or really was afraid to go in certain rooms, and I felt more comfortable hanging out in others. But I love this idea that it's all energy, and that energy is actually what's creating our life. It's also what's very healing, and maybe the deepest self-care is tending to that energy.
Oh, can I just tell you that you talking about all those different parts of ourselves, and basically the work that you've been doing is integrating all those different parts of ourselves, bringing it all together, is, I think, some of the same kind of healing work that I think we're all trying to do in some way, shape, or form. I think especially, I think about it through the lens of what it's like to be part of the LGBTQ all the other letters on top of that, community, has been a process for me of integrating all those different parts of myself that make the greater whole, not abandoning any part of myself, not feeling ashamed of any part of myself or my experience, just having a deep level of acceptance and radical self-love and compassion for all the different parts of myself, and knowing that they all contribute to a greater whole.
Mm.
And I wouldn't be the person I am today without each and every one of those little parts of myself. So it's important that I don't forget about them, that I don't let them go.
Yeah, and as a starting point, that it's about integrating these parts, right? And I think that's really important. You said something that I want to lean into, and that is radical self-love. A lot of times, I think we've been programmed so deeply to think about or to experience love in a conditional way, and of course, that comes often from our childhood or from our programming, or the judgment of maybe the teachers or the parents or people around us. But this idea of radical self-love, because the way I say it and the way I frame it is, I remember when my nephew was really young and he was having an intense emotional experience. Some would call it a meltdown, but it's actually just someone emoting, having that intensity. And I remember, if I would just get down on his level and be present with him, in other words, if I were to love him, he would actually, those emotions would then kind of regulate and they would move through him, and he would return back to this homeostasis of joy. And I think a lot of times we think things like, well, how can I have radical self-love when there's parts of me I want to change? And the question I ask someone is, which would help you change more, radical self-love or radical self-judgment? I lived in that radical self-judgment. You mentioned shame, and I had so much shame that I thought the way that I would get through this shame was to actually be critical of myself. And at one point I realized, oh my goodness, I've been really brutal to myself and with myself. I'd love to hear more from you about radical self-love.
Yes, thank you for sharing all that. I deeply resonate with everything that you just said. What comes to mind is my part of my recovery journey. One of the things that I learned early on in recovery is just part of the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I've learned over the years to accept people, places, and things, myself included, more and more. That there are certain things that I don't have the ability to change. So there's certain things that I honestly don't need to change. It's a matter of, how can I learn to love this part of myself more? Perhaps I don't know everything that there is to know about this part of myself and its usefulness and how integral it is to who I am. What if that part that I may not be fond of were to leave me? How would that change me? Would it change me in a way that I think it would? Or would something be taken away from me that is such an important part of who I am that afterwards I wouldn't be recognizable to myself or perhaps to other people? And maybe it's those things that make me so special and that really draws people to me in my life. And like we said a moment ago, it's all about community. We don't all live alone. We need each other to help each other to live. So that's gotten me to think about, how can I be more in acceptance of all parts of myself? Like, it's interesting. Okay, true story. My entire life, for as long as I can remember, I've been a nail biter ever since I was a kid. I used to be shamed by my father around that all the time. And I've had this thought in me that that's a bad part of me and that I need to change it. I need to stop doing that. But in the last couple of years, I've thought to myself, well, what if you bite your nails for the rest of your life? Does that really matter? Does it make you any less of a person? Does it make you does it make you unworthy? What if you can never change that thing about yourself, Stephen? Are you going to sit and be upset and miserable and mad, or are you going to get on with it? So I've come to this point of being able to accept that part of me. And who knows, maybe in an acceptance of it, maybe someday I'll wake up and I won't bite my nails anymore. Who knows?
Well, there's one way to find out, right? Because
Yeah.
the reason I say that is I spent so much time being critical of the behavior, and that just kept it alive. And so trying this idea of self-love and acceptance, not with, because I tried to trick the universe. I've tried to trick the universe so many times and trick myself. Like I would say I'm going to love myself so that I would change. And then I realized that's not actually radical self-love. That's self-love hoping for an outcome, right? And so when I really just abandon that and say, let me love myself right where I am. And one of the things that came up as you were talking, I was thinking about the late, great Wayne Dyer. He said, he was a person in recovery. He never said that, but I know he was by his languaging and a couple of the things that he said. But he leaned into this idea of character defects. We hear that a lot in recovery circles, right? I have these defects of character. And he said something that I thought was so wise. He said, character defects are only assets with the volume turned up too high.
Amen.
And I think what we're looking at there is not let me be rid of this, but if you're looking at something like nail biting, it's not is the nail biting bad or right or wrong or good or bad, and how do I get rid of it? It might be asking, what is it managing? Right? What is underneath that? So it's not the behavior. And when I'm at odds with myself or a behavior, it seems to get stuck. It's so paradoxical, right? When I allow myself to love myself right where I am, like you say, and you said, we might be able to discover something deeper that's actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And to know at the end of it all, it's all good. It's all right. It's as it should be. All is well. I think sometimes I can only speak for myself, can be conditioned to look for the problems.
Yeah.
Look for the problem, look for where the other shoe is going to drop and such. And maybe there aren't any shoes that are going to drop. Maybe things are actually better than I thought or I can imagine. So, yeah.
One of the frameworks in my model conscious recovery, I rather than calling something a coping strategy or a defense mechanism, I call it a brilliant strategy.
Oh, I love that.
The strategy was brilliant when I first started it. And what ends up happening oftentimes is it becomes an unconscious or an automatic response when things get difficult or when things get uncertain. I think being in the uncertainty is a place of difficulty for a lot of people, especially people in early recovery. And so being able to be curious and be open and look at the strategy, not as something that's bad or wrong. And I think I'm hearing you say that so loud and clear and so beautifully simple in its articulation that when I start to say, let me be curious about this, instead of let me get rid of this, instead of saying one day I will, instead, all is well in this moment. Not one day I'll be okay, but I already am. What if this strategy is brilliant? And then we can start dialoguing with that strategy and then looking for something deeper within that.
Yeah, leaning into what we are resisting, lean into the thing that we are perceiving as a threat to really, going back to what Byron Katie asks that question, like, is this true? Is it true? Is it true? And one of the things that recovery has taught me is that life is not black and white. There's a lot of gray, and I don't know everything. So that makes me, hopefully, and over time, it's made me more open to asking questions, not jumping to conclusions, being a bit more expansive in my thinking. And I think that's all part of what helps me take care of myself today.
I'm also thinking about how I have a relationship with myself is the same way I have a relationship with the world. And perhaps the same is true in reverse, right? So the more I can accept the world as it is, the more I can accept myself as I am. The more I accept myself as I am, the more I can accept the world as it is. And then I move out of, as you said, looking for answers and then becoming more curious and being in the question. And it's one of my favorite conversations because when I'm looking for answers, I, in some way, am looking for this external security. Let me figure it out. But when I'm in the question, I'm truly allowing myself to grow and expand because, as we know, nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah, yeah. And also, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really brilliant. Also, just because we accept something doesn't mean we have to like it.
Right.
Like there's a lot that I don't like about the world, but I accept it is the way that it is. And then what? So that's another thing. I used to think before that in order for me to accept something that I had to like it.
Yeah.
I had to like it, I had to think of it as right. It's like, no, I don't have to do that at all. That's the thing. Life is so nuanced, so complex, and it's so expansive. And part of my self-care is how can I allow myself to be more expansive in my thinking and not be so narrow. When I was in active addiction and even early sobriety too, I was just very narrow in my thinking, very rigid. And I totally get it. I think one of the reasons why I was that way is because I was trying to survive. Like you said, it's easy to view ourselves in very specific ways. I think it's part of our wiring to want to categorize things, know what this is or that is, so that we know what box to put it in, so that we can know what to think about it and feel safe. But there's so much more to life than just that. And the more I can be a bit more expansive, the better it is. Then life is just a bit softer. It's a bit gentler. And I'm all for the softness and the gentle.
That's right. And to me, the paradox is the more I do that, the more I seem to be able to affect change in my own life and in the lives of the people around me. You said something that I just think is just a beautiful quote, and I hope I'm going to get it the way you said it. Okay. Self-care is being expansive in my thinking.
Yeah.
Let's say more about that because let me say it again. And I think that's what you said. Self-care is being expansive in my thinking.
Yeah. I don't know if you or your viewers can relate to this, but for so many years in my life, I was a prisoner in a prison of my own making in my mind. And the way that I viewed myself, the way that I viewed people closest to me, the way I viewed the world. And I don't do that as much today. And it feels better because I have a more expansive view of myself and the world. And I also look at everything as it's serving a purpose in my life. Like, what is this here to teach me? Everything is energy. And I'm doing this dance with energy in my life. And how is this energy interacting with me? And how is it serving me?
What I also was thinking, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's just saying that's what it is for me. Go for it.
Yeah, no, same. I was thinking about my relationship with the world and, I got sober at 20, so I got sober young. Another way to say that is I don't have my addiction to blame for all the craziness in my 20s because I was totally sober. But my framework about the world was the world needed to change so that I could be happy. Now, I don't think I would have articulated it in that exact way. I just was like, the world is broken and I'm going to fight to make change. And I see so much of that within the LGBTQ plus community. Understandably, I get it. But there was a moment that something shifted for me. And I realized when I unplugged from trying to change the world and did my deeper healing, the world started changing before my eyes. And it felt like magic at that point in my life because I realized I was accountable. And this is all coming from something you said about having created your own prison. And that's exactly what my experience was. My points of view, the energy that I was holding, because we talk a lot about narrative, right? Change the story, change the narrative. We talk about core beliefs. I like to call them core false beliefs because they're lies that we're carrying. But I think oftentimes we fall short of what's really creating what we call reality, and that's the energy attached to all of that. And so I remember being a very young child and just being so open and effervescent and loving and kind. And when I think about what people look for in recovery or a spiritual awakening, it's really innate in the human experience. A very young child loves deeply. They feel their feelings. They're wide open. We get taught other things, but that's really our true nature. But I was holding this frequency. I remember just through my, like age 7 to 14 before I discovered drugs and alcohol. And then in my early sobriety, I just remember feeling so broken. So of course I saw the world as broken and I was trying to fix it from the outside in. That was a very long-winded way of saying, once I realized this was about healing it from the inside out instead of the outside in, it was like this miraculous change in the way I experienced myself in the world.
Amen. Yeah, I can identify with that. I can identify with wanting to change the world so I could feel better in myself. Didn't realize it was an inside job. And that when I start with myself, then that's going to affect how I view the world, how I view my relationships. That's huge.
Well, and I also think about compassion for like the clients we work with, the friends we have who are in that stage where the world seems broken. And there's so much of that right now. There's so much intensity right now within our community with things happening in the world and this sense of that there are things that are happening that are wrong in the world. And I understand and have compassion for that. But how do we meet someone and help them? I'm not going to get them to do anything, but how do we hold space for someone to do some of their deeper healing so that, because in my experience, that's actually how we change the world, is not by changing the world, but by changing ourselves first.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is in helping someone who is on that path, asking them how much they're engaging with media, how much they're engaging with the news. I think it's important to be informed. Sure. But the way that the world works is even if you're not watching the news every single day, information is getting to you. But if you're watching it every single moment, kind of like putting water on the stove to boil, like, when you're boiling an egg and you're looking at the water, waiting for it to boil, it feels like it takes forever. But the moment you step away from it and focus on something else, next thing you know, the water's boiling. But I think that there's just this steady diet of negativity and fear and animosity that's being churned up. It's all this distraction pulling us away from ourselves. What we're talking about is this healing work, this self-care, this coming back to yourself. How can you do that if you're pouring all of your energy out there instead of turning it around and just focusing in on yourself? And one of the things that I'm going to circle back to something we talked about in our first couple of minutes of this conversation, is self-care is often looked at as something selfish. Mm-hmm. Like it's selfish for you to, be concerned about yourself and taking care of yourself or doing this for yourself. Same thing in terms of how much we engage with what's happening in the world. There's very little we have control over in this world. One of the ways that I take care of myself is really being present with my surroundings. Yes, there's terrible things happening in Washington, D.C. Yes, there's terrible things happening in Gaza. Yes, there's terrible things happening in Ukraine. But when I look around I was just in a coffee shop, and I look around the coffee shop I was in, everyone was getting along. Everyone was kind and respectful to one another. People were laughing. There were, families in there, different groups of people, different races, ethnicities, ages, etc. And all was well. So I can't, in order to really do this work that I'm doing, and I encourage everyone to do, you have to be able to be present with all that, and not ignore that at the expense of, or focusing on all the things outside of yourself that you have no control over, without looking at what you do have influence over and what you're actually experiencing in that moment in your life in the day. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's so beautiful. And I think that's really how we create this greater sense of healing, not only for ourselves, but for the world. And that, to someone listening or watching right now, that might sound counterintuitive. What do you mean? Because I had a friend actually say, I don't think it's okay to say we should be happy right now with all the horrible things happening in the world. The issue with that is that we're on planet Earth. I love what Pema Chodron said. She said, if you're looking for safety and security, you've come to the wrong planet, right? Because there's always been all of this. And I'm not trying to be dismissive of that. I'm actually trying to look at what is more effective. When I find myself, because you mentioned this earlier, the mind really, its function is to sort and separate. Is this person safe? Is this group safe? We naturally other, that's a function of the mind, but there's something much greater happening here. And when I find my mind going into this is bad or this is good or this is right or this is wrong, instead I use this is my litmus test, or this is my formula, if you will. What gets created when so we could say, rather than it's bad to watch the news or it's good to watch the news or it shouldn't be happening, right? Nothing could be more demoralizing and not useful than to say something like it shouldn't be happening. So what gets created when I watch the news 4 hours a day? What might get created if I were to unplug from that and call or text someone who I love, right? We have decided collectively that the news is the horrible things happening in the world, but there's so much love happening, so much more, exponentially more love happening than that. I'm not saying that, and you're not saying, I heard you say this, it's not that we're pretending that it's not happening, but I think the deeper question here, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent and invite you to come with me, if you will.
I'm free. I'm willing. I'm open. Go for it.
I feel that about you, Stephen. It's great. And what I love is this is the first time we've actually had a conversation, which I just love, because we have common friends who've put us together for a reason. I feel like I could talk to you for an hour. But if I think about our movement and and when I say our movement, I mean LGBTQ, and, I'm a person of a certain age, right? So I lived through the AIDS crisis. I lived through a lot of different things. And I think sometimes there's an idea that the fight for our rights has helped, and on some level it has, but truly, I go back to the coffee shop that you're talking about. I think the way we've truly healed and the way we've truly had more acceptance in our culture is through love, not through the fight, right? It's through coming out to family members. It's through knowing people that are of a different race, of a different ethnicity, of a different sexual orientation, of a different gender expression. And if it's someone or something we don't know about, it's easy to other. But once we actually meet and talk with someone, there's a deeper level of healing that can happen.
Agreed. What you remind me of is our ability as human beings to feel our feelings.
Yeah.
And there's so many different emotions that we have the ability to experience, but oftentimes we get locked into just a handful. And it's easy to believe that if you're feeling one emotion, you can't feel another. Sometimes we get locked into anger, we get locked into frustration, we get locked into fear, and we block ourselves off of joy and peace, etc. And what I just encourage people to do is seek the balance. Seek the balance. And one of the ways that we seek balance is by making sure that the things that we do when we have in our lives are balanced. Like, I'm not saying don't watch the news, but maybe don't watch it as much as you watch it. I'm not saying don't turn on your cell phone in the morning, but maybe if you didn't turn on your cell phone and look at your messages or your notifications, maybe if you didn't look at them maybe the first half an hour that you wake up, maybe or hour, give yourself some space. I'm not saying that you have to be glued to your computer or to your TV screen all day, every day. But what if you were to go outside? What if you were to go outside and just go for a walk and maybe bring somebody with you or something like that? Just finding some sort of balance. I'm not saying don't drink coffee. I drink coffee, but have some water too. Have some water. Have some things that are going to nourish you instead of deplete you too. It's all about finding a balance. Yeah. So that everything flows, life flows when it's in balance.
I love that. Wow. Believe it or not, we're almost at the end of the conversation. I feel like
Get out of town.
time. So it has been about 30 minutes. So I wonder, first of all, I'd love to have you back to continue the conversation. But is there anything that is present for you at this moment, maybe that we haven't said or that we haven't talked about, or something that you would like to close with? Give you this opportunity.
Yeah, I just want to close with the message of like being good to yourself. Be good to yourself today. Protect your peace. Protect your joy. Peace and joy are our birthrights, right? And nobody has the right to take that away. We are responsible for that ourselves, and that's something that comes from within. So be good to yourself to help cultivate that within yourself today. That's my message.
I love it. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to have had you on the show. All of Stephen's contact information will be in the show notes. Reach out to him. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've really loved it. And for anyone who's watching or listening right now, if this has resonated with you, like, share, subscribe, all the things. Maybe even more importantly, if there's someone who comes to mind when you're hearing this conversation, who this might support in some way, please send it to them. That's really the intention of this show, to talk about how we can create and activate and live greater healing within the LGBTQ community. And not only that, but within the world. So Stephen, thank you again so much. I've truly been honored to have had this conversation with you. And peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Element Q podcast. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Element Q podcast. It's an honor to walk this path of healing and transformation with you. Remember, the courage and resilience of those who came before us live on in each of us. Let's continue to carry their legacy forward as we support one another in creating a world filled with love, gentleness, and empowerment. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we're building a brighter future, one story at a time. Until next time, I'm TJ Woodward, and this has been the Element Q podcast.